Hello, everyone. This is the 2026 Psychic Predictions video. Today's date is currently December 16th as of recording this video. And in this video, I will be discussing my clairvoyant visions of Donald Trump, world news, Bitcoin predictions, stocks, and the stock market, of course, and where humanity is headed long term. So last year I described 2025 as being like labor pains, and this, of course, I guess I said this in 2024 actually, about the year ahead, saying that 2025 would be like a year of labor pains. And it kind of has been a tough year, you could say, especially economically. But in particular, what I was talking about was the birthing of something new, this being a new culture. Some people refer to this as the new earth. That's another way of expressing this, but it's basically a shift in human consciousness, is really what it comes down to. And I do see this continuing to play out in 2026 as being more of the year that you could say the labor pains are kind of giving way to an actual birth of something new. So you may start to see the beginning of something new happening. Now, of course, when someone gives birth, there is a new baby there, but it doesn't really integrate into their life until later on. So I kind of hesitate on using that metaphor, but it's kind of the beginning of the birth, you could say, 2026. So it is exciting, but keep in mind that birth is a painful process. And in the past, before doctors, women died from giving birth. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be as pretty. People talk about someone giving birth and it's like a big celebration and it's happy and joy, but behind the scenes it's pretty brutal. And that, I think, will be kind of the perfect metaphor for the energy of 2026 moving into 2027. That's when people begin to be able to take the baby home, so to speak, from the hospital, like metaphorically. But it takes until around 2028 for people to really integrate this more. And 2028 is really kind of like the beginning of where it all settles into reality, and people are kind of starting a new life, a new era, you could say. And things will continue changing, but there's just this major shift. In the past, I described it as ending in 2027, but I feel like 2027 is kind of the peak of a lot of changes, and 2028 is kind of where it starts to really integrate more and materialize more. Um, the baby represents new cultural agreements, which is a positive thing. I do see things being good for a little while regarding that, challenging, of course, but kind of better after 2028. And then 2038, as I've said many times before, that's when things become very challenging. Um, I've described it before as, well, sometime around there, the oceans are rising. I think it will start before that, but it's going to be a very slow process. The water levels rising for whatever reason, and strong winds and the inability to grow crops. Not that people can't grow crops, but that it's more difficult for people to grow crops. And that's what I've seen for around the year 2038. I got the year 2038 because I do Bitcoin and crypto readings all the time, and a lot of the charts and my visions of it shift dramatically. They either go way down or they go way up around 2038. And so I was like, what's going on in 2038? And when I tuned into it, that's what I got. So that's kind of like a bigger picture situation. So let's kind of get back more to the present time. Last year, Actually, for 2025, I was saying that 2025 is kind of the year of waiting. Like, in other words, if there's a big move that you're making or something big that you're building up to in your life, that 2025 may feel like you want to do it, but it's not necessarily the best time to do it. Whereas 2026 seems to be more about kind of strategizing that plan and making the plans, but not necessarily jumping 100% into something, because I also get the sense that things are still shifting around a lot. And so if you create, extreme plans and go 100% into it and things shift, you're going to get the rug pulled out from under you. So it's good to make sure that you're making plans that are able to adjust and shift to the changing times, because that's kind of where we're at right now, economically and culturally speaking, and in just so many different ways. So moving on to the visions that I had of Donald Trump for the year of 2026. And I go a little beyond 2026, but generally speaking around 2026. So for 2026, I saw Donald Trump completely reshaping the U.S., and you could say that's kind of been happening a little bit in 2025 already, but I really see him getting his way with that in 2026. And he's acting very proud, very flashy, like almost putting on displays to show like what he's accomplished. And so it seems that things work for him at first glance, but kind of behind the scenes, there's a lot of his economic plans are not working out. So what I was sensing was international politics that are overpowering him when he thought that he could overpower them, like other countries, in other words, or international agreements between other countries that he thought he could kind of push through. I'm not specifically meaning tariffs, although that could be part of it potentially. I Just as a side note, I do see trade being destroyed. I've said that before Trump's second term even started, that I see the trade routes around the whole world getting messed up, and I think that this would have happened with or without Donald Trump. So it's just kind of baked in regardless. Sometimes things are just baked into the future. Of course, the future is not fully always set in stone. You can shift things, but some things are really kind of heavy and hard to shift, if that makes any sense. So Trump will be forced into some sort of agreements with other countries that he doesn't really like, but he will play it off as if it was an accomplishment of his own. So the economy in 2026, I'm not seeing it looking too great. I don't think that's a big surprise, but regardless, that's what I'm seeing. For years now, I've been saying that 2026 to 2027, there will be a big crash for Bitcoin and the stock market. And I've been saying for years now that it's around 2027, and then I started saying towards the end of 2026 or 2027, kind of both of those years potentially, but I'm thinking more so 2027. And now that I've been saying that, there's all these other people who are now saying it. And of course, whenever this happens, I get comments on my videos saying, "Oh, you're just a copycat saying what other people already said." Well, okay, sure. If you ask anyone who's been following me for years, I've been saying 2027 or 2026 potentially, but more so 2027, big crash in the market in Bitcoin. And now everybody else is saying it. So just keep that in mind. I'm not a copycat. All right, moving on. Another thing that also I've been blamed as being a copycat for, which I'm not, because this is what came to me in my meditation. So, regardless, I also predicted in my 2025 prediction video a year ago that Trump would step down in 2027. And he was being attacked regularly, his life being threatened, and a lot of people thought that that may be why I saw him stepping down, but that's not what I was getting the sense of. I was getting more so the sense that it would be a health issue. Since I've said that, we've now been seeing health issue scares for Donald Trump coming out in the news. But regardless, I think it's going to be related to health, but kind of a bigger thing. It's kind of like lots of many things. I think it will be partially due to his health, but partially due to the lack of his success. And I think we're going to be seeing more of that in 2026, which will then lead to make more sense in 2027. And if and when he does step down, as I've been seeing in my visions. So sorry, I have an alarm going off. Excuse that. So, anyways, I do see him stepping down in 2027. And the U.S. economy does seem to be pretty damaged, and I don't think that this is necessarily just because of Donald Trump or because of any particular president. I feel that this has been baked into the future, just kind of like destiny in a way, regardless of who would have won. It doesn't really matter. But I don't really see the U.S. economy really fully recovering. Instead, what I've been talking about on my Patreon for a while now is what I'm seeing instead is that the European Union and the federal government kind of work together, and it's almost as if the federal government and the European Union kind of become one thing, or they both kind of disappear and then they re-emerge as one thing, however you want to think about it. But it's as if they are cooperating as one entity. And I do believe that other countries will probably get in with this as well. So it's not just the European Union and the Federal Reserve, but it's kind of like just a bigger international control system. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that's going to happen in 2026 or 2027. That's probably like, I don't know exactly when, 5-10 years out, something like that. So I saw visions of Donald Trump sending planes with gear to give to Russia and China as if helping them after making some new deals with Russia and China. So I don't believe that this necessarily means that Donald Trump or the U.S. will be on their side, but there will be more collaboration, is what I was getting. I kind of got the sense that what's going through Donald Trump's mind during this is if you can't beat them, then join them. And he's basically being forced into this, kind of like what I was saying previously. Despite this cooperation and despite Donald Trump trying to cooperate, I do still see Donald Trump being played by Putin. In other words, kind of deceived and tricked by Putin. So, that doesn't look too great for him. I also got the sense that the second half of the year of 2026 interest rates will go up. That was just kind of a random thing that popped in my mind, so I thought I would say it. I also get the sense of new IDs or stricter IDs. I believe they have the real ID that is now mandatory for being on a flight unless you have a passport. But I get the sense that these are going to become more important and there's going to be stronger surveillance under Donald Trump. And, I've been saying this before Donald Trump's second term even started, that before the term technocrat even was circulating, I was saying that Donald Trump is pushing mass surveillance before he was even elected for the second term. And that's definitely been playing out with the people he's associating with and the corporations he's working with. And I believe that this will become more apparent as we move forward in 2026. I'm about to get to the Bitcoin predictions here, but real quick, if you appreciate this content, give this video a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And if you have not yet, you can subscribe for monthly predictions every month for the month before the month starts. And of course, this is not a monthly prediction, this is a yearly prediction, but most of my videos are monthly predictions. So anyways, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin for 2026, I'm seeing actually January or the start of the year actually seems to be decent for Bitcoin. Now, it hasn't been doing very well overall, but just the beginning of the year, January or so, it seems to be like, oh, maybe we're having hope again. But then around February or March, and it might not be specifically February or March, but sometime after then, around there, it seems that it comes back down, and it doesn't seem to be doing that great for 2026. Now, I've been saying this for years again, that 2026 doesn't seem like it's going to be as great as all the hype, and now that we're here, everyone's starting to agree with me. So, yeah. So I'm more interested in holding Bitcoin dividend stocks than Bitcoin itself right now. That's just personally, not investment advice. There could be a drop around the end of 2026 as well. But 2027 in particular seems pretty bad for Bitcoin. That's where I expect things to go south. So I plan on hopefully having some money on the side to buy some Bitcoin in 2027 when that happens, because I see 2028 looking pretty good for Bitcoin and moving forward. Well, until 2030, which I will get to in a second here after I talk about the stock market real quick. I see for the stock market as a whole, of course, not all stocks will be like this, but the overall general stock market, I see new highs around the middle of the year of 2026, so it doesn't seem that bad. But the second half of the year looks like stocks start going down slowly. It's not like a massive quick drop, it's more like a slow, consistent drop. The start of 2027 looks like the worst of the worst for the bear market. But then in 2028, it starts to improve with new highs. Or not necessarily 2028, but it could be 2028 or 2029 potentially. Just the sense is that it starts to go back up and improve with new highs. But around the year 2030 to 2033, that's when I see a lot of major corporations crashing. Like Apple, Microsoft, corporations of that nature, big corporations, losing power due to the market being disrupted by new technology coming out. And some of this technology is slowly coming out in 2026, but it's really not. A lot of people say there's going to be a whole bunch of new technology in 2026. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I feel like it's kind of more like a long spread out thing that goes until 2030, unfortunately. So it's not going to all happen in 2026, I don't think. But regardless, you may start to see markets reacting negatively around the end of 2029, where these major corporations, they just become outdated, basically, and we don't have a need for them as a society like we used to. So around 2030 is when it really crashes. But 2029, you may start to see it. So if you hold stocks, and well, basically any stocks, or if you hold anything really, then watch out for that in 2029 before it hits in 2030. And I believe it will last until 2033 before it really starts to recover. And then, of course, 2038, as I mentioned before, there could be some challenges for humanity. Of course, the future is not always set in stone, so you can always shift timelines. So hopefully we can do that, but I do feel that there is a lot of weight within that future possibility. So moving on to world news, I went over Trump news and Bitcoin and the stock market. So let's talk more about the overall world news now before we wrap it up. So I did see visions of China producing more stuff, and by that I don't know what, just exports of some sort that they're selling and making money off of. I specifically got South America, as though China may start making more trade deals with South America or just start selling more stuff to South America for whatever reason. It looks like China could become more powerful despite Donald Trump's attempts to stop their rising power in 2026. Now, a lot of people are concerned about World War III. I don't see World War III playing out in 2026. It does seem that 2027 we could get a little closer to some sort of situation like that, although I would be cautious to necessarily label it World War III. I feel like it may be close to that. It may be debatable whether or not you actually want to call it World War III or not, but it does seem like there's a lot of just chaos in the world in 2027. 2026 I definitely don't feel is World War III though. I feel that if anything it is an economic Cold War. So not so much like the US and all the major countries battling it out, but more like maybe proxy wars and economic wars, which means basically a Cold War. So I do see specifically Russia attacking Europe, not literally attacking though, but economically attacking them, but not using weapons. So that's what I see. So when people talk about the coming war or whatever, that's how I see it. I don't see it being like a physical war with Russia fighting other countries besides Ukraine. I don't think that Russia wants to invade any countries beyond taking over a little bit less than half of Ukraine is how I'm seeing it. I don't think they really are going to push much further than that. When the Ukraine war first started, I said that Russia would slowly take over Ukraine over a very slow process and change the borders permanently. So I still believe that to be true. When it first happened, everyone, of course, said I was crazy because Russia was supposedly going to wipe out Ukraine overnight, and then the US stepped in, and then everybody said, oh, well, what you're saying is still not possible because now Russia has no chance, and I've been saying the same thing for years now, since 2022, and it's starting to become more obvious, and not only that, but also those who have been watching me for a while already know this, but also I predicted in 2020, back in 2020 when COVID was just ending, I said before there was any of this major war around the world, I said there's a war coming, or it felt like there could be a war coming in 2022 specifically, and I said it would involve Moscow, Ukraine, and the US, but not involve US being active in the actual battles in the year 2022, and that's exactly what happened. After that, I also have been saying that everything that's been going on, Russia slowly taking land more and more over time. Now, sure, they go back and forth a little bit, but overall, it's been Russia taking more and more land. And I do see that happening, but I don't see Russia taking more than half of Ukraine. It looks like maybe a little bit less than half of Ukraine. And they are getting kind of close to that now. So 2026, I think that will continue. I don't see the war ending in 2026, though. And even if there is some sort of peace treaty, I've said this for a very long time now, even if there is a peace treaty, I still see the war continuing on after that through militias or other militant organizations that aren't technically part of the Ukrainian government. So even if the Ukrainian government signs some sort of peace treaty or whatever, there's still people fighting, is what I'm saying. So I would consider that the peace does not actually end. I would consider that the war continuing. And so when it first happened, I said that this was going to be like a 5-year war. It's been 22, 23, 24, 25, 3 years. So we've got about 2 more years left or so. Of course, 5 years was an approximation, but I still feel that it's going to be around 5 years or so. So I think it's going to continue through 2026. Moving on to Venezuela. Now, of course, Venezuela, also before it happened, I predicted there would be a fight. I predicted there would be some sort of attack on Colombia that would be a fight between the U.S. and the BRICS nations, and it would be all about this division of those two sides somehow related to an attack on Colombia. Now, it turned out it wasn't Colombia, but it was their next door neighbor, Venezuela, who does share a lot of the Colombian cartels. So I believe that I was just mixing it up with Colombia because, well, Venezuela is right next to them, and it was about cartels, which are usually more so associated with Colombia. But either way, I see this as being a major battleground between the U.S. and BRICS nations moving forward. It's not necessarily like a hot war, but more like kind of like a cold, like covert operation war where there's stuff going on kind of behind the scenes, like spies and secret missions and things like that going on that isn't necessarily even going to be fully apparent in the news. But I do get the sense that the president of Venezuela, or currently now, probably won't be much longer, but it seems obvious now that he's probably going to be taken out. But regardless, that's what I've been saying for a while now. The oil is an important factor, of course, and the ability of the U.S. to have a chance against the power of the BRICS nations. Economically speaking, we need that oil to have a chance against BRICS. BRICS, of course, mostly represents Russia and China, but other countries as well. And that's what I was saying from the very beginning before it even happened, that this is kind of the energy behind that attack was a battle between the U.S. and the BRICS nations. And it's not about the drugs. It's really a kind of like a secret war, Cold War, between those opposing forces meeting in Venezuela. For the record, I said that before Venezuela was attacked, or even in the news at all. So, just to validate that there is probably some truth to that prediction. So, lots of covert battles taking place and lots of tension around that situation in 2026 is what I sense, but not like major bombs being dropped or major wars or anything like that. Only covert operations. Anyways, the Middle East. Okay, got a little bit more to go here, not too much longer. The Middle East. I see more war in the Middle East. The war seems to be less centered around Gaza, though, and instead it seems to involve different Muslim countries. So in meditation, I got the sense that in 2026 we will see more bombings or missile strikes on the Houthis again. Also, Kuwait, the country Kuwait, popped in my mind as somewhere that could be struck with explosives. Now, I didn't even know where Kuwait was. I'm not good at geography, I'll admit that. But turns out Kuwait is bordering Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. So it's possible in the way that I got Colombia and it was really Venezuela right next door. It's possible that Kuwait showed up in my mind, even though it could just be on the border around Kuwait and not technically in Kuwait. So maybe it potentially is more like Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, maybe all three, or maybe it's Kuwait literally. I don't know, but what came into my mind was Kuwait, so I'm just being fully transparent here with how things come to me. And it's not always necessarily like specifically Kuwait, but somewhere around Kuwait is what I would say for sure. So, long-term picture of the world powers. And this is the last section of this video. So I've been saying a long time, for years now, that Europe is going to be destabilized by some elite powers on purpose in order to take over countries' powers, or in order to take over the power of countries, and replace the national power with the power of corporations, or centralized power, or like a international bureaucratic kind of power that basically is more of a corporate power. And this is what I've been saying for a long time before the word technocratic started surfacing in 2025. So Trump seems to be making this even more obvious recently. And even recently he's been talking about a new decision to stop supporting European countries economically. And I believe that this is all part of this situation where we're not supporting countries. Instead, we're supporting corporations and tech companies in particular. Because if you rely on technology, then that technology on some level owns you. It's hard to do much without a phone these days. Many jobs require you to have a phone. And so if suddenly you were banned from having certain access to certain technologies, that could be detrimental. And so that's a really easy way to control people. And I believe that there's a lot of control over the population coming through corporations and technology rather than national control. And so they're trying to kind of get rid of the national control and replace it by funding technology corporations instead, if that makes sense. So also in Europe, I previously predicted that there would be more protests in Europe, which we've been seeing due to crazy laws being put in place, restricting freedom of expression and even arresting people for posting their political opinions on Facebook. So it's gotten kind of crazy from what I've seen, especially in the UK, but maybe elsewhere in Europe, I'm not sure. I see this all as part of the plan that I was just talking about to stir the pot in order to kind of break down the countries, kind of cause chaos so that people stop supporting their own nations. So then it's easier to kind of unite them under their power. Their, as in the technocrats. That's the new word for it, and that makes sense. So I expect more protests in Europe for 2026, but then things seem to change in 2027 when this all kind of starts melting to a melting point, and shifts start happening. Things start changing. For good and bad. So it's a touchy subject, and I think that this will become a major important thing in the future in 2027 or so, maybe in 2026 too. But regardless, I think it's good for us to just become aware that some of this movement to unify is going to be a good thing, and part of part of it will be good, and part of it will be a power grab. But it's important to not lump it all into one narrative, because it is a mixed bag of two things. One is the evolution of the spirit of humanity, and the other is the elite controlled manipulation over humanity. So both things are happening at once. There's a natural movement to unify, which is due to higher frequencies, higher vibrations, people coming together, people organizing. This is a natural evolution of humanity, which I would say is a good thing. What's happening is that sometimes that unification can be hijacked. And so that's where you see the idea of globalization or centralized power being able to have a top-down rule over more people and take over the whole world over with that system. So both things are playing out simultaneously. It's important to not just jump on one bandwagon and be like, they're unifying, therefore they're evil, or say that all unification is good, because it's a mixed bag. So that is the most crucial thing I think that people are going to need to understand in order to comprehend what's going on in the future. So in the future, in 2026, I do see, well, maybe a little after 2026, I see the US starting to follow a similar trend to Europe, unfortunately, in that sense that I was just describing. And eventually, the Federal Reserve and the European Union will kind of start working together more and become kind of like one thing, as I was talking about before, creating more of an international network involving the US and Europe primarily, along with other countries as well, small countries that may tag along. And that seems to be a big shift for the future, further out. For 2026, I see ID verification becoming more and more complicated. So, in other words, to identify yourself becoming more necessary, but also more complicated on purpose. Because when it is difficult to verify something, you become frustrated and you say, why can't we just have all this information in one database that's easily accessible? And that's exactly what the smart people are trying to push for, so that then the technocrats have access to all of that information all at once, because now we've decided, well, it's so difficult to live in this world with information over here, we need to verify over there, cross-reference, blah, 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 why not just put it all together? Well, now they've tricked the public into doing the bidding of the technocrats. So that's what we'll be seeing in 2026. So I've said since before Trump was in office that he was pushing a surveillance state, and this will become more and more obvious in 2026, as if it wasn't already in 2025. And that is the predictions that I have for 2026 so far. Subscribe for monthly predictions every month, for the month, before the month starts, and give this video a thumbs up if you have not yet. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.